Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. Yesterday we talked about the remnant of Moab and how that remnant was given a chance to make peace with God through making a beeline to Mount Moriah and through the lamb that they could offer up, the tribute lamb. And we talked about the fact that in God's mercy and grace, even in the midst of a situation of judgment, he makes a way for those who by faith seek him and seek peace with him. And he always leaves the door open for the faithful few who will turn to him. Today we can turn our attention to those who are not the remnant, those who do not seek the Lord by faith. The rest of the people who did not were not saved in this particular situation, but actually underwent judgment and destruction. And we can find at least three main things that seem to crop up in connection to those who would not be the remnant. And these are typified by Moab, Damascus, and Egypt. Moab basically personified pride. That becomes a big theme in chapter 16 of Moab, or actually in that whole section, 15 and 16, where it says in verse 6 of chapter 16, "We have heard of the pride of Moab, an excessive pride, even of his arrogance, pride and fury. His idle boasts are false." And so Moab really exemplified pride. That was kind of their main deal. That was their main characteristic. And that kept the majority of that nation from being the remnant, from actually turning to the Lord. In their pride, and their self-confidence, they thought that they would be okay perhaps, and they didn't turn to the Lord and seek God. With Damascus, it was more about forgetting God. This is more in connection with God's people in the north, but they had basically forgotten God. It says that plainly in chapter 17 and verse 10. It says, "For you have forgotten the God of your salvation, and have not remembered the rock of your refuge." And so Ephraim and Damascus, that whole northern part up there, they would fall because they had forgotten God, which had led them into idol worship and other things. And so forgetting God, even though they had known God, had a covenantal relationship with God at one point, they had strayed away from the Lord and forgotten him. With Egypt, we could say self-reliance is the main deal with them. It talks about how God would confound their strategy, verse 3, which implies that they were relying a lot on their strategy, and God would confound that, and it says, so that they would resort to idols and ghosts of the dead and mediums and spiritists. So when their strategy failed, they didn't turn to the Lord, they turned to these other things, to idols, ghosts, mediums, and spiritists. And so they were trying to seek a solution on their own. And so Egypt could be the personification of self-reliance. So when we put these three ideas together, we can see why it is that most of the people in this time frame did not become a part of the faithful remnant. It was because of pride, of forgetting God, and of self-reliance. And I would say that these three things play a major role in a lot of people even today from becoming, quote unquote, the faithful remnant. That is, those who will turn to the Lord through the grace offered in Jesus Christ. Oftentimes it's because of these three things. They are too prideful, perhaps, thinking that they don't need a savior. They don't need a crutch, so to speak, as far as religion or anything like that. And so they think that they can get along pretty well on their own. Or it might be that they just have forgotten God. Maybe once in their life they had known the Lord, but they pushed the Lord to the side and just didn't really pay much attention to him and kind of replaced God with other things, as Ephraim did. And because of that replacement, they fell away from the Lord. Romans chapter 1 talks about this in quite detail. It talks about the unwise exchange that the people described in Romans chapter 1 did. Exchanged the creature for the creator, the truth for a lie, that sort of thing. That would be similar to what some people experience even today. And then self-reliance as well. Of course, if we think that we're good enough in and of ourselves, if we think we're moral enough to have a standing before God, if we think we can work our way to heaven, certainly we won't need a savior. Certainly we wouldn't need to trust in Jesus. We can figure things out on our own. We've got things handled down here. We'll let God handle things up there. And we just have a distance between us and God. And we just feel like we can get along on our own. And I think the more that technology advances, the more and more mankind in general has this type of attitude. And so these are three things that we could look out for and really have a red flag come up if they begin to creep up in our heart. Are we becoming prideful? Are we beginning to forget God in our lives? And are we becoming too self-reliant? This could happen even to a Christian after they come to faith. They can begin to become too prideful. They can begin to forget God, and they can begin to become self-reliant. But we always need to humbly walk before the Lord, walk by faith, trusting in Him, not forgetting the Lord, but remembering Him each and every day, keeping Him in the forefront of our minds, and relying on Him for everything, for our physical life, spiritual life, our emotional well-being, everything. Just rely on the Lord for everything and depend on Him and not trust in ourselves or lean on our own understanding. So these are some things that we can look out for even as Christians. These are also things that might be a barrier for those who we love, who we want to bring to Christ, that we can kind of deal with and wrestle with and maybe help them through. Hopefully these are some things that can benefit us as we both serve the Lord and bringing other people to the Lord, and as we ourselves try to build a relationship with God ourselves. So these are some things to think about. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.